Listen to this.
Moment's pang of conscience. Because, and I've said this before, but boy, is it more clear now, he clinically, the right clinical diagnosis for Donald Trump is sociopath or psychopath. And a psychopath / sociopath has no conscience. And that's what makes him most dangerous. If you get two teams on a football field and one football team says, hey, the only difference for us is we won't play by the rules, you've got an enormous advantage. That's his enormous advantage.
Right. And the people around him now gearing up for what would be round two, some of them were legally ostracized. I mean, people like Mr. Bannon, he's a federal convict. Federally, he could be pardoned, but some of them were legally ostracized. Some of them politically broke. And some of them said, well, working with him even briefly as you did is a lot. They don't want to do it again. The problem is who's left are the more extreme people. And I say that by introduction to a clip that overlaps with what you were saying. And again, we monitor this stuff. We show people the clips for a reason. What happens on War Room and the right-wing information structure and those networks and some of those podcasts is a normalizing of what they're going to do so that it will start out, they would argue, not as a surprise or extreme. And the attack on dissent, as you mentioned, political opposition, Cheney, and yes, the free press. And okay, we're sitting here as part of the free press, full disclosure. But the attack on the free press is being telegraphed, much in the way it has been done in other countries where violence and vigilantism has ruled. So this is a person who was considered very extreme at the Pentagon on Bannon's War Room. Take a look.
We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Yes, we're going to come after the people in the media who lied about American citizens, who helped Joe Biden rig presidential elections. We're going to come after you.
This is someone whose history is with the guns and the bombs. This is not just some, oh gosh, Twitter post. He was at the Pentagon, and he would go back there, and there are rules and things that are supposed to protect us no matter who becomes president. But a lot more of those people makes a difference. How do you convey that to the public, that someone who says they liked what they thought they would get from Trump 16 is actually quite different than what they would get by 28?
Yes. And it's because a lot of the guardrails that protected us were his lack of understanding of how to actually execute against his impulses. And he was, pretty second rate at bringing to life what he wanted to bring to life. But yes, he is much, much more better armed to go and do what he wants to do. And it's not just bringing in some ways, it's extremely frightening to bring in someone who's been in the Pentagon and have him say that. But it's equally frightening to have him bring in people who have absolutely no qualifications whatsoever, which is exactly who he's going to bring in. Because the number one rule to be appointed to a post for Trump is to be a sycophant and to go along with whatever he asks.
Yeah. Tony Schwartz.
Streaming apps to watch what you want faster and easier than ever. It's streaming simplified.
I don't know who that guy is. I don't know what his credentials are. I don't know if he's a doctor. I don't know if he's got a PhD or whatever's going on with him. But he made a little bit of sense pertaining to somebody not wanting to play by the rules. The thing about it is, it was the people that wanted this to come into an existence. If it wasn't, he never would have got elected the first time. So you got to look at it from another perspective other than it being vigilante. I mean, does that mean half the nation is vigilantes? I mean, I don't know, but I'm just talking here pertaining to a democracy that's supposed to be open and fair and free-minded. I personally don't think that our country has ever been this split before, other than if you go back right before or during the Civil War. And what has caused this? That's the $64,000 question. It's not Donald Trump that's caused this. It's not Donald Trump. They're just putting a whammy on Donald Trump. Donald Trump's just the scapegoat. This has been building and building and building since the late 80s, early 90s, whenever they thought that they could just run the show any way that they wanted to up there in the White House. Basically, paying off every Tom, Dick, and Harry. I mean, whenever you're going to give like three pallets of nothing but $100 bills stacked almost to your head, and dump them off over there in the Middle East for a bunch of people to take advantage of, and not counting all the other stuff that we have done for all the other countries. I mean, you can't just keep spending and spending and spending and think that one day that you ain't going to have to pay the piper. That's where we're at. We're at the crossroads towards somebody going to have to pay the piper. And I've used this analogy before, and I'll use it again. It's as if everybody was asleep at the wheel until Donald Trump come on board.
Okay, New York.
Because it was Donald Trump that started bringing a lot of things into sight that most of the American people had no idea was being run that way. Kind of like the tariffs and all that other stuff. We didn't realize what was going on. Or, let me put it this way, certain people didn't, the majority of the people didn't know what was going on until Donald Trump come on board. Now it's as if everybody in a coliseum decides that they're going to go down to the field all at one time, because they've now awoken and realizing this thing is really way out there. I mean, whenever we're talking about shutting the government down almost every freaking 6 months, and we're talking about not even being able to help the commitment pertaining to the Ukrainians, or help one of our number one allies across the ocean pertaining to Jerusalem, that pretty well speaks volumes about where we are right now. And these are the things that I have been trying to prevent all along. But nobody wanted to give me any credit. Nobody wanted to listen to anything I had to say. And now you have brought this travesty up onto all the people, beginning with Ronald Reagan and Mr. Bush. And to top it off, it was Mr. Bush that followed off the coattail of Reagan that even dug the hole even that much deeper. They talked a good talk pertaining to peace out of one side of their mouth, but in reality, they wasn't studying peace. This government was not studying peace whenever they went to war with the Iraqi people. They said that they was going to war to basically bring stability to that region over there with Desert Storm and Desert Shield, and defeat the axis of evil, but they had the wrong target man pointed out towards it actually being the axis of evil. Now, there's plenty of people that fit the description of being the axis of evil over there. Don't think for a second that they don't. But that's that way in Africa. That's that way in Mexico. That's that way in South America. That's that way in Russia. That's that way right here in America. You got mean, evil, demonic, cruel people all over the world. Now it's caught up with us. And who do we have to blame? Basically ourselves. Because nobody was willing to raise a red flag. Like I said, I seen this thing falling apart. Basically in I think it was, let me think now, let me get my dates right. I think it was in 2003, somewhere around in there, whenever they elected Obama. I thought to myself, that was very, very odd in voting in somebody with the same name of one of the terrorists. I think it was the main one, Osama bin Laden or something like that. I thought that was very, very odd for that to have happened. And, you know, I've talked to other people about this, and the bottom line is this: the people that's in charge, that's running the world is in fact the one percenters. Now you can decorate them up any way you want to, regardless whether they're the rich businesses, the conglomerates, or the millionaires here in America, pertaining to the farming industry or the trucking industry or whatever. You can stack them and pack them up any way you want to, but the bottom line is this: somebody has been calling the shots for a long time here in America, and I think it's got to do with the Masons and Illuminatis. A matter of fact, I would almost be willing to bet the farm on it that it's got everything to do with the Masons and Illuminatis. Everything. Because they was the ones who wanted to bring prophecy into play that I think could have been one of the reasons why Kennedy was assassinated. And I think that Kennedy was fixing to expose them. But Kennedy had already ruffled up a bunch of feathers, especially up here in Kentucky. And because of it, they didn't just go after him. They didn't just go after JFK. They went after the whole family. Now, if that's not a mobster type act, and then covered up, and still to this day, the people don't know the whole truth about what went on pertaining to the Kennedy assassination, that's whenever our politicians started paddling backwards. That's whenever they started giving the farm away. That's whenever America started losing its grip.
A man firing a shotgun outside the first night of Hanukkah. Police saying at least 2 shotgun blasts were fired on the grounds of a synagogue in Albany. Inside an early child care center with 24 preschoolers, but no one injured. The suspect in custody, the incident being investigated as a hate crime. The governor ordering the police and National Guard on high alert for safety concerns nationwide as Hanukkah begins. Also tonight, the investigation after the deadly mass shooting on the UNLV campus. The gunman, a professor who was rejected for a job by the university, and what we're learning about the victims. The historic ruling in Texas, a judge granting a woman's emergency request to bypass the state's near total ban on abortion after learning her fetus had a fatal genetic disease. She joins us with her emotional reaction and how the state is still trying to stop her. In Gaza, the fighting raging as the war reaches the 2-month mark. Richard Engel with the freed Israeli hostage as she finally returns home. Donald Trump back in court for his civil fraud trial after skipping the GOP debate, and what his campaign said today about future debates. And typing out tunes, the orchestra making music in a whole new key.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and welcome. Just hours before this evening's start of the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah, shots were fired onto the grounds of a synagogue in Albany, New York, further stoking concerns over the holiday and rising acts of anti-Semitism in this country. Officials say no one was hurt and a 28-year-old man has been taken into custody. The shots were fired outside Temple, Israel in Albany, where 24 preschoolers inside were immediately placed on lockdown. They are now safely reunited with their families. Police tonight are quoting the shooter as having said, "Free Palestine." Authorities saying the case is being investigated as a hate crime. New York Governor Kathy Hochul tonight has put state police and New York National Guard on alert, saying the safety of Jewish New Yorkers is non-negotiable. Emily Aketa has late details.
On the first night of Hanukkah, police across New York ramping up patrols at Jewish sites after gunfire caused a major scare at Temple Israel in Albany this afternoon.
Shotgun in his hoodie in the parking lot nearby. A report of 1 shot heard.
Officials say the suspect is a 28-year-old local who was walking around outside the synagogue and acting very suspicious.
According to witnesses, he fired off a round from his shotgun while making threatening statements.
Law enforcement now investigating the shooting as a hate crime.
We were told by responding officers that he made a comment, free Palestine.
On the synagogue's premises, 24 preschoolers. It was the director of the Early Childhood Center who first heard the shots and called 911, according to officials. The suspect, who has a rap sheet, was apprehended in a neighboring parking lot.
Thankfully, at this time, no one was injured in this incident. But the fear that it has wreaked, the fear and the anxiety that it has caused, I know a lot of people are feeling really shaken right now.
Security had already been enhanced at synagogues, yeshivas, and community centers for the Jewish holiday, amid rising tensions stemming from the Israel-Hamas war. Just in September, the same location of today's gunfire faced a bomb threat.
Emily, what are officials saying about any ongoing threats following this incident?
Well, Lester, New York Governor Kathy Hochul says there are no ongoing threats at this time, but we're learning tonight from her office that hate crimes across the board in New York in November were up 90% compared to last year. Lester?
Emily Akata starting us off tonight. Thank you. In Las Vegas, there are new details about the gunman at UNLV's campus, a college professor turned down for a job. As we learn more about the victims, all faculty slain at the school. Steve Patterson with late details now.
Tonight, new details after shots rang out on another American college campus.
We're good. Come on, everybody, keep your hands up, you guys. Keep your hands up, please.
This time inside UNLV's business school.
Gunshot was so close. I feel like he's coming in, and the only thing you can do is praying that he doesn't pick this room.
Police say 67-year-old Anthony Polito opened fire on the building's 4th floor just before noon Wednesday, shooting and killing 3. 64-year-old Professor Jerry Chang, 39-year-old Assistant Professor Patricia Navarro-Velez. The third victim, also faculty, hasn't been named until their family can be notified. One gunshot survivor is still in the hospital.
The suspect had a list of people he was seeking on a university campus, as well as faculty from the Eastern Carolina University.
He previously worked at other universities across the Southeast, touted a membership in Mensa, the high IQ society, and was prone to posting conspiracy theories on his personal website. But investigators are stopping short of assigning motive.
Now, let's go back to the psychiatric community. Does that look like a candidate of somebody that's got a mental illness? You talking about somebody that's ranked way up there, pretty close to Einstein, I guess. The psychiatric community is right in one way, but they're so wrong in another, pretending to this spiritual warfare where these evil demonic spirits are taking over these people and allowing for them to do what they're doing in the public with innocent lives. It's just absolutely sickening. It's mind-boggling to me that it's gone on this far, this long, and somebody hadn't stood up towards putting an end to it.
Applied numerous times for a job with several Nevada higher education institutions and was denied each time.
If our law pertaining to our lawmakers and our judges, our police forces, if they're not willing to stand up and do the proper and right thing pertaining to all this, in which I don't just blame the politicians, I blame the church world too, because they have allowed for this to fester and fester and fester to the degree of what it is right now. But if they don't stand up and change and put an end to all this, we're basically doomed as a civilized society here in America. We're basically doomed. Because God, if man can't put an end to it, God will.
Today, police shared video of the moment Polito was killed as he engaged police outside.
Evacuate to a safe area, run, hide, fight.
Business law student Caleb Melise was in class just 2 floors down when he heard the shots rang out.
What did it sound like? It sounded like balloons popping. We were kind of oblivious of it. We didn't really realize what was going on at first.
Melise says, incredibly, this isn't his first mass shooting. He was at the deadliest mass shooting in American history, the Las Vegas Music Festival in 2017 that left 58 people dead.
How many times are we going to go through this? Yeah, some people cried, but it was like, we were like desensitized to it.
A legacy of violence, leaving Las Vegas numb.
And Steve, what more are officials saying about the suspect's other potential targets?
Lester, authorities now say they believe if the suspect wasn't taken down when he was, that he was heading right for the student union. They also say he mailed out 22 letters to other targets. The first one they intercepted contained an unknown white substance. So they are telling anyone in education, if you received an unmarked letter, don't open it. Lester?
Steve Patterson, thanks. In Texas, where most abortions are illegal, a judge today granted a woman's request to have an abortion that her doctor says is medically necessary. It's one of the biggest cases since Roe v. Wade was overturned. Here's Laura Jarrett.
Kate Cox was running out of time. After learning at 20 weeks that the baby she's expecting has a fetal abnormality, the 31-year-old mom of 2 filed a lawsuit in Texas seeking an emergency abortion. Today, a judge agreed.
I never thought I would ever need or want an abortion.
If Cox carried the pregnancy to term, doctors warned she would be at risk for serious complications that could affect her ability to have more children.
There's no outcome here that I take home my healthy baby girl.
Texas bans most abortions as soon as the baby has a heartbeat. There are medical exceptions, but critics say the language is vague, leaving doctors fearful of getting sued for performing one without a court order. Today, the judge siding with Cox, saying the idea that Miss Cox wants desperately to be a parent and this law might actually cause her to lose that ability is shocking and would...
Months ago today, Hamas terrorists unleashed their murderous rampage inside Israel. And tonight, some of the survivors of the attack return home for the first time, including a recently released hostage who spoke with our Richard Engel.
2 months after Hamas killed more than 1,200 people in Israel, the Israeli military is escalating its campaign to overthrow the group in Gaza. But for the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza who can't leave, the war isn't the only danger. Hunger is spreading. Massive crowds gathered today outside a food distribution center. The UN is warning of a humanitarian catastrophe. Just across the border from Gaza, we visited the kibbutz Nir Oz, where on October 7th, Hamas fighters killed and kidnapped everyone they could find. Driven by her neighbor, Irina Tati returned this morning. The 73-year-old was held hostage by Hamas in Gaza and freed last week. She was overwhelmed by the damage. Her door is still smashed in. Hamas dragged her away from here. Irina came back to collect a prayer book for Hanukkah. Her neighbor, Rita Lifshitz, tells her Hamas is still firing rockets and she should go to the safe room if there's incoming. Irina badly wanted to see if her cat was still alive. She thought about the cat while a hostage, and when she found him, she smiled.
What's it like for you to come back here after all that you've been through?
Here I feel better, but not very well. I want the war to stop, she says. She did not want to talk about what happened to her while she was a captive. And Irina's 28-year-old grandson is still being held in Gaza. Hanukkah is a holiday of light. People close to us in Gaza must return home, she says. Hamas went house to house here for 8 agonizing hours before any rescue came. Residents locked themselves in their safe rooms. So Hamas set houses on fire to smoke them out. Rita says many here are furious at Hamas and the government.
How did it take 8 hours to have a response?
Why it took 8 hours? Because they didn't care. 6:30 they came in here.
Rita took me to the local post office, where the boxes have been marked with stickers.
This is one of the most disturbing images that I've seen in a long time. This post office, and on the boxes, red, killed, blue, returned, black, dead.
Yes.
And to be honest, there's not a lot of blue.
Next door is the cafeteria, where the tables are set for those who can't come, the dead and missing. 1 out of every 4 people who lived on this kibbutz was either murdered or taken hostage.
Now it's the first holiday of the kibbutz that is not happening, and we need to bring them back now.
And tonight we're learning that Israel has agreed at U.S. request to open another border crossing into Gaza for humanitarian aid. Lester?
That was an extraordinary visit. Richard, thank you. Tonight, with 39 days to the Iowa caucus.
University of Pennsylvania and MIT were on Capitol Hill to address anti-Semitism and Islamophobia on their campuses.
Calling for the genocide of Jews violates Harvard Code of Conduct, correct?
Again, it depends on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes, and this is why you should resign.
Harvard and Penn's presidents tried to clarify their answers to that specific question on the issue of calls for genocide.
I want to be clear. A call for genocide of Jewish people is threatening, deeply so.
Harvard's president, writing in part, calls for violence or genocide against the Jewish community or any religious or ethnic group are vile. They have no place at Harvard. At times throughout the hearing, the leaders of the schools condemned the hate on campus, while also citing the importance of freedom of speech. But criticism came swiftly, and from both Republicans and Democrats.
It should not be hard to condemn genocide. Genocide against Jews, genocide against anyone else.
White House spokesman Andrew Bates writing, "It's unbelievable that this needs to be said. Calls for genocide are monstrous." Students rallied on campus today outside McGill's office.
I'm a Jewish student here, and I think that she needs to step down.
Tonight, Penn is facing possible financial fallout. A wealthy donor is threatening to pull a $100 million donation, calling for the president to be replaced. The school tells us tonight there's no plan to change leadership, Lester.
All right, Stephanie, thanks very much. Coming up as we continue a new record of the crisis at the southern border and how it's impacting one major American city as winter nears. Crisis at the border. A record 12,000 undocumented migrants stopped in a single day by Border Patrol this week. And as Julia Ainsley reports, it's adding up to more strain on some of America's biggest cities.
Tonight, Denver joining the growing list of cities struggling to handle a record surge of migrants, with entire blocks full of migrants sleeping on the street.
Oh, it is a crisis.
Mike Johnston is one of 5 Democratic mayors recently writing President Biden, saying action is needed to help cities address the crisis.
What's the one thing you want from the Biden administration right now?
When you admit someone for asylum in the country, they should get work authorization. We should expedite the process of approving that application so it doesn't take 4 years. It could take 30 days.
Johnston is under increasing pressure from counties outside of Denver that are not taking in migrants. Suburban Douglas County passing a resolution demanding Denver drop its status as a sanctuary city, a jurisdiction where officials won't enforce federal immigration laws. Critics say that attracts more migrants, with illegal crossings at the southern border this year at record highs.
What would you like to see?
The media and the politicians, they want to degrade January the 6th pertaining to the uprising, the insurrection. But what they need to do is look at themselves in allowing for this to get out of hand the way that it is, that basically bad action calls for more bad action. Because if you think that these people that's been in power for 20, 25, 30 years, if you think that they're just going to walk away from their positions because they realize that they was part of the problem rather than part of the solution to the problem, you got another thought coming. They're not just going to walk away. You would think that they would have the decency to do that, but they're not going to do that because they got too many obligations. They got to make payments. They got too many vacation homes and yachts and putting their nieces and nephews and stuff like that in college. People woke up during the presidency of Donald Trump, and the people reacted to it. Now, if that's not democracy at play, I don't know what is. I don't go along with the violence. I never have went along with violence. I've always been a peaceful person. I've always tried to distribute love. Sometimes I may distribute in a hardcore way, pretending a tough love strategy, but I've always tried to have the person's interest at heart before I either say something or do something. But for this to have agonizingly gone on as long as it has is a strong, strong indication of a travesty that began not in Biden's era, not in Trump's era, but you got to go on back about 4, 5, 6 more presidencies before you'll get to the main target of who started going backwards. It's sad. It really is sad. And you don't think that other leaders in other countries cannot figure this out? We're very, very vulnerable right now. We're vulnerable in not having a stiff arm, in being able to basically clean up our own streets, much less be open season in target practice and pertaining to how many times has our military been provoked? About 60 or 70 times last time I looked over there in the Middle East. And I just don't know what to say about all this. It's really bad. I wish that somebody could wave a wand over it and make it all go away. But I know, logically speaking, practically speaking, that isn't going to happen that way. Once more, too many people has too much interest, has too much at stake. And, it has festered. It has evolved into what it is right now, with all the illegal stuff going on and all the what was it, some sort of drug for pain. I think it was cottonizing or something like that. And then you got the fentanyl problem, and then you got the spending problem, and then you got basically a society that is just a lawless society right now. You don't have no law and order. You got the law, but you don't have the order.
City do?
I'd like the city to actively proclaim that it is not a sanctuary city. I think it's important that we're not bringing people to a cold weather climate.
There are more than 2,600 migrants in Denver's shelter system, and now nearly 30,000 who have come through Denver in the last year, costing taxpayers more than $32 million so far. Denver's shelters are full, with some migrants now sleeping in tent encampments like these, where temperatures drop below freezing at night.
Yeah. You ain't talking about out in San Diego, California, or Florida, or Texas. You're talking about an area that could easily get 10 below and have 2 feet of snow. How them people going to survive out there in tents? up there in Colorado, the Mile High City.
It just seems like pretty inconvenient for them and for us. Really, a lot of people in this apartment complex are concerned.
Families with children are given priority in Denver shelters. We meet a group of adults who just arrived. Genesis from Venezuela said they don't know where they're supposed to go next. We don't know. We have no knowledge, direction, location, she tells us. Jan saying, we had to go through 7 countries on foot through the jungle. We came for the opportunity for the work permit.
Mayor Johnson says Denver expects to spend as much as $100 million on migrants in the next year, but they're only budgeted for $20 million. Lester?
All right, Julia Ainsley, thank you. Up next, they all play the keyboard, making their own type of...
See, something like that hits a city. That's almost like a major catastrophe, like a forces of nature event, like a hurricane or a flood or a fire or whatever, or a bunch of tornadoes or whatever. I mean, we're getting it on all fronts. We're getting it from Mother Nature. We're getting it from our own resources being drained. We're getting it towards people coming over here. And I ain't going to lie to you, it makes me feel uncomfortable and me trying to communicate with somebody and they can't speak a bit of English. I tried to be patient in dealing with the people, but I guarantee you the majority of the people right here in Northwest Tennessee that are digging holes and burying lines. I don't know if they're putting in gas lines. I don't know if they're putting in internet lines. I don't know what they're doing, but I just about guarantee you that the majority of them cannot speak a bit of English. They're hard workers. They're very hard workers. And you train them to do what needs to be done. They don't have no problem in doing it. But is that really fair for the American people? For us to be invaded like this? I mean, I realized back, I think it was somewhere around 2000. It may have been after 9/11. For some reason, they made an announcement on the radio that basically got everybody talking about how that we was no longer the majority, that the minority has now outweighed the minority has outweighed the majority. In other words, there's more foreigners in America than sovereign American citizens. And that was somewhere in right around 2000. So you can only imagine what the statistics are now. It's a runaway train. It's a runaway train that can't nobody solve by taking a magic wand and making it all go away.
Type of music.
I don't know what's going to happen to us. I just said something the other day to the post office man. He halfway agreed with me. I said, you know, if this country goes belly up to the point that we get taken over by another entity, I go, whenever we die and we make it into the glory land, I go, we're going to have some explaining to do to all our ancestors in how come we allowed for this to get in this bad of a shape. And it hasn't been in just until the past few years that it's been recognized as such. Because they're gonna question the sovereign citizens of America, especially the older ones, the adult ones. They're going to question them of how come they didn't see this coming. How come they didn't put security systems up to be able to stop this? Because you take under consideration, these are the same people that went down to the Alamo and fought and died back in the original movement of taking over Sanchez and all the other stuff over there that happened, those people bled and died for our liberty so that we would be in control of our own country. Whenever you have to change the voice system pertaining to telephones of one for American or English and two for Mexican or Spanish, something's wrong with that concept of a nation that has to do that just to be able to cooperate with everybody over here that can't speak English. I've never seen nothing like it. And I go back to the point of origin of 1988, whenever 9 Tapes went to the White House, and the politicians nor the preachers pertaining to the corporate churches did not respond the way that they should have responded. And now they have brought great distress, affliction upon to our lives. Affliction. In so many different ways, we are under bondage. And if we're not under bondage, in the sense of what I just got through talking about, we're under bondage, we're under financial bondage, or we're under the bondage of not being able to be safe out on the streets no more. We're under bondage pertaining to not having opportunities for our children to grow up and maintain a good family status atmosphere, because now our children has to move off somewhere in the bigger cities just to be able to make a living for themselves. If you're in these rural areas like in Northwest Tennessee, we've been hijacked. We've been hijacked a little at a time, just like I talk about pertaining to the small fox. You don't have to worry about the big fox because you see him coming. You can run him off. You know he's out there in your grapes trying to steal all your merchandise. It's the little small ones. It's the little ones that are small enough that you can't see them, and plus they're small enough that they can maneuver in and out of the vines real well, and they'll chew a little here and chew a little there and chew a little here, and the next thing you know, your whole vineyard is dying. What happened to my merchandise? Well, you've been robbed. You've been a thief has come in and done this. Why? Because you wasn't paying close enough attention. Good luck to all of us on this first day of Hanukkah. Good luck to all of us. And as I say all the time, heaven help us all. May God bless America and may God bless our troops. Because I promise you, we're going to need God's blessing to ever be able to work out of this fix that we are obviously in. Shalom.